What's up, y'all? It's Dr. Paul with Liberty Hill Comics, where I share my passion and over 40 years of experience comic book collecting, investing, and conservation with you. Today, we're continuing the conservation project for this copy of Flash number 123, the first appearance of the Golden Age Flash Jay Garrick in the Silver Age, and the first acknowledgement of an alternate reality in which the Golden Age heroes exist, which is the beginning of the multiverse concept in comic books. Published in September 1961 by DC, it was written by Gardner Fox and drawn by Carmine Infantino. It is also the first appearance in the Silver Age of Golden Age Flash villains, the Fiddler, the Thinker, and the Shade. This is a huge Silver Age key without which the multiverse concept in both DC and Marvel Comics wouldn't exist. In Episode 1, we completed a thorough assessment of this book and developed a conservation game plan. The cover had a small hole in it, but the major flaw we uncovered is that it appears someone spilled a can of Coke on the interior of this comic book, and wraps 1, 6, 7, and 8 were affected fairly dramatically. Wrap 8 is the centerfold, which appeared to be ground zero for the spill, and also has a spine split we need to address. Here is our conservation plan for the book, including disassembly, wet cleaning, deacidification, resizing for the cover, stain removal for the inner wraps, tear seals, cold press, reassembly, folding, and final press. In Episode 2, we got to work and disassembled the book in preparation of today's work on the cover. If you want to watch either of the first 2 episodes before watching this one, just click on the playlist I've created for this project. Today, we're going to complete all of the work on the cover: wet clean, deacidify, resize, and tear seal. Alright, let's get to work. I'm starting with my photo development tray on my workbench, to which I'll add a sheet of Hollytex, then our cover, followed by another sheet of Hollytex, so we now have a sandwich here. To this I'm going to add my first wash. The primary purpose of this wash is cleaning and deacidification of the page. Prior to starting today, I put the cover in my humidity chamber for 2 hours to prepare it for this wash. While the cover is wetting, let's talk about our materials and methods a bit. Hollytex is a non-woven polyester fabric that is inert with respect to all of the aqueous solutions we'll use. Doesn't have a woven pattern that will imprint upon our paper, and is quite strong despite being diaphanous and translucent. It is also very hydrophilic, so it will readily wet and help us bring our aqueous solution in close proximity to our paper, which, owing to the sizing used during the paper manufacturing process, is actually slightly hydrophobic. Having the solution in close proximity to the paper speeds up all of our washing steps and assists in the transfer of contaminants out of the paper. By sandwiching our cover between 2 layers of Hollytex, we can hasten the wetting and washing process, support the wet paper safely, and once we're done with our wet cleaning, the Hollytex will help hasten the drying process too by wicking away the aqueous solution. Lastly, we're going to use an archival glue to repair the ripped flap in the cover, and the glue is only mildly adhesive to the Hollytex, which will assist us in getting the repair to dry flat, but be easy to release from the Hollytex when drying is complete. It's important to remove all of the air bubbles and make sure our sheet is completely wet and flat. Failure to do this could lead to dry spots where all of the contaminants in the wet paper get deposited in a tide line that is very difficult or impossible to remove later. The purpose of the primary wash is to clean and deacidify the cover. It should remove any contaminants in the paper, including tanning and acids. The solution is 400 ml of warm tap water, 100 ml of saturated calcium hydroxide solution, and 5 drops of Triton X100, a non-ionic surfactant that will help lift any contaminants that are not water-soluble from the cover. We are only using 5 drops of Triton X100 because I've calculated the minimum amount that will be effective to clean the cover using our knowledge of the critical micelle concentration. In conservation, we always want to do the least invasive materials and methods that will be effective in accomplishing our goal, so these calculations are important. Using the minimum amount of surfactant that will be effective also makes it easier to completely remove the surfactant with subsequent washes. For more information on the formulation of the solutions we'll use today and how to make them, check out my video on advanced wet cleaning, deacidification, and resizing. This is a 5-minute wash, and I've only performed one rocking of the photo tray today, and I did it with the paper pinned down with my fingers at about the 3-minute mark. While more convective flow during the wash should help hasten removal of contaminants, we recently washed a cover with this same method with near constant rocking motion, and it resulted in ink loss to the cover which, after an investigation and discussion with fellow conservators, I hypothesized was because the rocking motion created abrasion between the cover and the Hollytex fabric that resulted in the ink loss. You can check out that video here for a more thorough discussion of the topic. Today we are testing my hypothesis by running the same process back on a similar comic book, minus the constant rocking of the tray. After 5 minutes in this wash, it's time to remove the Hollytex and cover sandwich and place it on some paper towels. The paper towels hasten the removal of residual rinsate from the first wash by drawing it out of the Hollytex by capillary action. While they are doing their work, I change out the solution in the photo development tray from the first wash to the second. The second wash is 400 ml of warm water with 300 ml of saturated calcium hydroxide, and will also be for 5 minutes with one short rocking session at about the 3-minute mark. The primary purpose of this wash is to remove residual contaminants and surfactant from the cover and provide an alkaline reserve to protect the paper from future acid-catalyzed hydrolysis of the cellulose, which is what breaks down the paper over time. Excess calcium hydroxide gets deposited in the paper as it dries and reacts with CO2 in the air to form calcium carbonate, which will stay in the paper and act as an acid buffer in the future. I sped up the video, so here comes our short rocking. I'm going to pin the page down like Captain Larry does on Flying L Comics and just give it a few gentle sloshes and then leave it for 2 more minutes, and we'll remove it the same way we did the first wash. At the 5-minute mark, I pull the tray from my work mat, place some paper towels down, pull the page out of the tray, place it on the paper towels, swap out the fluid of wash 2 for wash 3 in the tray, place the cover in the tray. At the 3-minute mark, I'll agitate the tray after pinning the page. This is wash 3. Wash 3 is 400 ml total, 300 ml of 1% methyl cellulose for resizing, and 100 ml of saturated calcium hydroxide for deacidification and deposition of the alkaline reserve. Again, for information on how to properly make this solution, see my video on advanced washing, deacidification, and sizing, because the methyl cellulose does not readily go into solution at room temperature. It takes a little finesse, so I make this solution either the night before or morning of, and for that reason it's also at room temperature. At the 5-minute mark, it's time for this cover to come out of the third and final wash. We're going to do the tear seals next, and I want this page to be damp but not fully saturated with water. So we're going to dry it a little bit more thoroughly than we did between the washes. I'm going to lay it on 2 layers of paper towel. And it's important here, we're starting to get it nice and flat. So I'm going to take a little bit of extra care to make sure that it's laid out sort of centered on the paper towel and more or less flat. And we're going to take a moment to make sure that that dog ear on the bottom right corner and the torn flap in the middle are laid out correctly so that we can repair them and so that they dry flat. So there's the dog ear. We'll just flip it down into place. Here, I said it was a hole, but actually it's a torn flap with most of the paper still there. But we have to get it unrolled and flattened out properly. This is going to require me unrolling the paper or unfolding the paper from both sides. So I'm going to lay the Hollytex back over the cover and flip it over so that I can get to that folded flap of paper from the other side. Looks pretty good after the third wash. I did not see any precipitate or debris in the wash. That's a good sign. I saw it last time with the ink loss. I also don't see any ink loss on this cover, but we'll do a more thorough look at it after we dry it. Alright, I'm satisfied that's as flat as it can be from this side. I'm going to go ahead and put 2 more paper towels and then my granite slab, just probably for about 5 to 10 minutes. This is going to get the page about the right saturation for me. I've described it before as if you take a sponge and it's completely saturated and you wring it out, it's still wet all the way through, but it can hold additional water. It's not fully saturated, although it's wet all the way through. That's kind of the state we want the page in, because we want the page to absorb the methylcellulose glue that we're going to be using. So I've removed my paper towels, and now I have the Hollytex sandwich directly on my playmat. Another way that you can tell that you have about the right amount of water is the Hollytex takes on this less transparent state where it's harder to see through it. I've adjusted my ring light, and I'm going to make final adjustments to that little flap. Make sure it's as flat as possible. I'm going to go ahead and check it from the other side because, of course, that's the side we'll see as observers most often, even though the repair is going to be on the reverse, this obverse. And I'm satisfied that's about as flat as I'm going to get it. That was a pretty bad crinkled up flap of paper, so bad that I thought it was an actual hole. So it's not going to get much better than that. And that means I think we're ready to go ahead and perform our tear seal here. So ergonomics are important. Great lighting is important. A lot of your outcome is in correctly setting up your work. I have magnification at 10x with a ring light. I have really intense lights that I can see really well. Your fingers are one of the most sensitive tools you have. And I'm just making sure that I don't have like a lump of paper there. And the paper at this point is still quite wet. It sort of is pulpy. You can move it around a little bit. Here I have the Tengujo paper. I decided to use 2 smaller pieces for the 2 tears, and I'm going to glue it in place with methyl cellulose. This is my number 5 sable brush. The Tengujo is from Talus. It's the 5 grams per square meter. It's white. And I'm just going to take the methyl cellulose, put it in the center of the Tengujo, and brush it from the center out. You see that I'm using quite a wet brush, depositing quite a bit in the methyl cellulose. This is on purpose. The methyl cellulose glue is almost entirely water by volume with just a tiny amount of methyl cellulose in solution. I use Lineco Archival methyl cellulose for conservationist that I purchased from Amazon, and I prepare it per the manufacturer's instructions. And what will happen is the water will be absorbed down into the paper. I'm going to wait about 10 minutes so that it no longer appears wet on the surface. And then I'm going to go ahead and start drying this page. We want to dry it as quickly as possible once we're done with all of our work. So I'm going to put paper towels plus the granite weight. I'm going to leave them. This page is now a little bit drier, so I'm going to leave this first set of paper towels on here for about 30 minutes. Then I'll change them out again at 2 to 4 hours, and I'll change them out again either overnight or the next day. And then the page will be ready to go between sheets of Bristol in my large Masterpiece 350 seal press. And I'll show you what it looked like after cold press in a few moments, but first let's look at the results from our washes. Despite this cover not being substantially tanned, our first wash still removed a fair amount of contaminants and tanning from the cover, as it's intended to. You can see there are suds in the rinseate because we used the surfactant. The second wash removed residual contaminants and surfactant and is suds free, demonstrating that we've effectively removed the Tritenex 100 from the paper. The primary goal with our last wash is to deposit our sizing agent and alkaline reserve, which is why I only used 400 mils. You can see a few suds because the methyl cellulose is slightly lubricious and promotes bubble formation in the solution. I'd say we've effectively washed, deacidified, and resized the cover. But did we suffer any ink loss as we did with these same 3 washes the last time we used them on an early Silver Age Flash comic book? Here's the cover after drying in the cold press. I'm happy to say there is no substantial loss of ink like we had last time. I can't be certain whether there aren't a few flecks of ink missing here or there. Unfortunately, in my excitement to run this experiment back, I failed to get really good still images of the front cover and back before I started. So we'll continue to follow up on this. But the cover looks brighter, cleaner, and we've substantially preserved the inks, so I'm very happy with this outcome. Here's a close-up of the archival tear seal we performed from the obverse, and while you can see a little bit of sort of a scratch in the paper, it's dramatically improved from the hole that was there before we did our work. The reverse of the cover likewise looks phenomenal. We've preserved our nice dark saturated black inks, and we've lightened the paper considerably. Recall that it was off-white to cream, and I'd say that this paper now is just white. Lastly, here's a close-up of our archival tear seal as seen from the reverse. This is where the Japanese paper is actually glued to our comic book cover. It's almost invisible, and it's going to be covered inside the fold. So I don't think that this tear seal is ever going to be noticed by a casual observer. I really couldn't be happier with the outcome of this wet clean, deacidification, and resizing of the cover to this classic Flash key issue. The results support our hypothesis that the rocking of the aqueous wash, especially during the resizing step during which the paper is even more fragile than when it's merely wet, resulted in ink loss from abrasion against the Hollytex substrate. We successfully removed the contaminants from this cover, brightened it up, deacidified it, restored the sizing, which both strengthens the paper and restores its water resistance, and left an alkaline reserve to protect this comic from acid for the next century. We'll continue to perfect this three-step wash, but I believe we have an effective and safe formula when used correctly. We'll continue to collect more data as we conserve more comics on the channel. I sincerely appreciate you joining me today for the conservation project featuring this key Silver Age Flash comic book. Do you think we'll be able to enjoy a similar success with the stain removal for the interior wraps? We'll find out in the next few episodes, so stay tuned. Most of the materials I'm using for this project are available from Amazon and the affiliate links in the video description if you need any of them for your own conservation efforts. If you enjoyed this video, please take a few seconds to give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps me get the word out about the channel and our comic book conservation efforts. Until next time, take care of one another.